Hello, boys and girls. I'm not going to bother with a giant paragraph telling you to tickle my bell this week. We're just going to dive straight into this new episode, The Believer. Spoilers. Obviously. This episode began with a reminder of the New Republic's authority. An arcade-style grabber version of the AT-AT was seen lifting a TIE fighter out of a junkyard. I hope that this TIE fighter will be salvaged for a similar functional and peaceful purpose. I mentioned in my previous analysis that the Mandalorian producers have hired some amazing location scouts. I would have made a similar comment here in regards to this planet, would it not have been for somebody in the comments section drawing my attention to a video displaying how most of this show is filmed on set. A whole variety of post-production is eliminated as they no longer have to use green screens. Instead, they have this extremely immersive real-time technology to make these incredibly detailed scenes and backgrounds. I'll leave a link in the description as I found it to be rather eye-opening. It made me realize just how much time this technology saves, thus explaining how they can produce so much high-quality footage in such a small space of time. As expected, Bill Burr's character Mayfeld was recruited for the purpose of helping Mando retrieve the child. I was extremely happy that this wasn't another prison breakout mission like the one we saw in the first season. It was still a heist mission, but a bloody good one that managed to push the narrative forward whilst getting some character development for Mayfeld and Mando. Cara Dune relieved Mayfeld of his work and led him towards the Slave One ship. I've got to say that the ship really does blend in with the background. Perhaps it's this very camouflage that explains how Boba Fett was able to track Mando through the galaxy this whole season. We then saw Boba in shiny, cleaned up gear that just made me moist. Off the tail end of this hilarious comment that Mayfeld was expecting Mando, we then saw him show up and truly wipe the smirk off Mayfeld's face. With the Avengers now assembled, the score heard playing for the title card toned down the trap elements and introduced more strings. Then we got a couple of little scenes establishing the plan. Seeing all this anti-imperial activity from Boba, I did think this a little strange given his previous dealings with the Empire. In the previous episode though, he did say that he wasn't loyal to anybody. I do think that Boba working for the Empire in Empire Strikes Back does seem a little odd now that he's been introduced as the son of a foundling. However, I do like this idea of Fett infiltrating the higher ranks of the Empire, working against them whilst also doing business with them. The characters flew to a base on the planet Morak, where the Empire's remnants were farming a highly volatile substance and taking it back to their base on these vehicles known as juggernauts. Mando and the gang hijack it, but at the cost of Mando's armor. This definitely threw a spanner into the works for this episode.
You said you couldn't take your helmet off, and now you got a stormtrooper one on, so what's the rule? Is it that you can't take off your Mando helmet, or you can't show your face?
All of Mayfeld's taunting throughout perfectly fitted in with Burr's style of stand-up comedy. He'll pick holes and point out inconsistencies within people's belief systems and everyday behavior. Here in The Mandalorian, it worked to create great humor, but also served to further Mando's own doubts about his way of life.
Seems to me like your rules start to change when you get desperate.
Over on the YouTube channel Star Wars Explained, they made a great point about how Mando lifting his helmet in front of the child whilst eating served to further sow these seeds of doubt in episode 4. This was right after he met a bunch of Mandalorians who happily take off their helmets too. The point being that it's slowly becoming apparent that you don't need to follow the creed devoutly in order to be considered Mandalorian. Mayfeld reflected the audience's natural concern that with Mando's easing of his devoutness, what would make him unique otherwise? I did like that Mayfeld's past involvement in the Imperial remnants gave him the knowledge of how to drive the Juggernaut, or at least I'm guessing that's how he knew. This aspect also made him fit into the narrative without forcing him back into the story just for the sake of a cameo. Then the attacks began with volatile explosions seen in the background. This introduced the mechanisms and boundaries of this chase sequence. The pair were warned to keep an eye on the temperature of their cargo, restricting them in terms of speed, and yet...
Hey guys, We're still on the clock?
Accompanied by Mando not wearing his Beskar and his pistol jamming, this weakening of our character's potential ramped up the tension by evening out the playing field against these, pirates?
Pirates on my ship, I'll see they all hang.
I'm sorry, but they all looked like copy-pasted aliens. Every skiff thing that came towards the Juggernaut was full of exactly the same men. The martial arts were on point as always, though, especially with that satisfying spin kick. When the third wave came, this would have been the perfect dank pharik moment that never came. I swear they used that phrase so often, and yet I still don't even understand its significance. Do you? Let me know in the comments, folks. I'd love to know. It was terrific seeing the TIE fighters and countless stormtroopers defending Mando and Mayfeld. Whilst being spectacular, it gave me quite an uncomfortable feeling because normally these ships and shooters are there to instill fear. When I saw the TIE fighter being clawed out of the junkyard at the start, I immediately thought things had gotten better, when actually these bad guys haven't quite been beaten into total submission yet. What a great juxtaposition of emotions this show was able to produce by the end of that chase. When the pair reached the terminal, this was the part where Mando broke his own code to save Grogu. This was the very desperation Mayfeld pointed out earlier in the episode, but was simultaneously a tactical decision given that literally nobody there was going to recognize him. This reasoning worked against the scene somewhat though, because when I think of facial scans, I presume it's like a thumbprint. The scan has to match an image on a database. Therefore, this machine should reasonably have come up with the same error as before, because there are no stormtroopers in the database with Mando's face that we know of. It seems like a pretty flimsy security system if all that's required of the user is the removal of their helmet. A friend of mine suggested that this removal of the helmet was done in case there is a clause in Pedro Pascal's contract that states he has to take off his helmet at least once per season for the sake of acting credibility. I honestly don't know if such things exist, but it's an interesting thought all the same. Then the most creepy Imperial officer ever came along to shoot the tension through the roof.
What's your TK number?
TK421, TK421, say it, goddammit! Seriously though, this guy's southern accent and creepy smile just made me think that if he existed in the real world, he'd definitely own slaves. Accompanied by Ludwig Göransson's score, that intense suspicion he held towards the pair really kept me on the edge of my seat until he made them sit and have a drink with him. This was where Mayfeld stopped pretending and just went full truth bomb on this officer. I've heard that Operation Cinder was part of a set of contingency plans in the event that the Empire fell. From the Empire's point of view, the fall of the Emperor would be the result of the Empire failing itself. Therefore, a whole bunch of Imperial planets were incinerated to prevent both the Empire and its enemies from outliving him. I think this officer's dialogue was really telling though.
You see, with the Redonium you've delivered, we can create havoc that's gonna make Burning Khan just pale by comparison.
In order to save one child, these two would have essentially condemned thousands of people to pointless deaths across the universe had Mayfeld not sniped the Juggernauts as he was leaving. Then this amazing escape sequence took place. The crew now being fully assembled meant that the whole plan worked itself out super smoothly. From sniper no sniping to the destruction of the TIE fighters. Thinking back to episode 4 when Cara and Greef were being pursued by TIE fighters, to see how efficiently Boba was able to deal with them really showed how tight this team can be when fighting the Empire. Now they've just got to deal with the boss level, that gigantic Imperial ship of Moff Gideon's. You might have recognized this bomb going off from Attack of the Clones, when Jango and little kiddie Boba were chasing Obi-Wan around the planet Geonosis. Even that remix of Boba Fett's theme thrown in here. God, I cannot get enough of seeing this version of Boba kicking ass in this show. Mando will always be my favorite of the pair, but he should definitely be taking notes throughout this whole experience. In the epilogue of the story, Mayfeld was left on Morak to presumably live out the rest of his days as a freed man. It seemed like a connection was being made between this moment and when the officer was talking about how people think that they want freedom when what they actually want is order. It felt bittersweet to leave Mayfeld behind but I think his lack of refusal indicated that when you have no freedom at all, freedom is all you crave for. It might also be a form of meta script writing punishment for being the only man in the galaxy to have seen Mando's face and lived. That would have been a perfect round off for the episode, but we got one more sting in the tail. Mando reciting the speech Moff gave to him last season. This was a truly satisfying right back at ya moment to tease the rescue that's going to come next Friday. Oh my god, I cannot wait! Thanks for watching. Please consider supporting these analysis videos by making a pledge on my Patreon page. What did you think of this episode? Comment below your thoughts or join us for a chinwag on my Discord server where we'll continue this discussion.